we already know what Triple G can do to that level, and we also know what Triple G can do to the level above that, and through no fault of his own, we haven't been able to see what he can do to the level above that, because they won't get in with him. The only top fighter who seemed willing to get in the ring with Triple G right away has been Andre Ward, who at this point is a light heavyweight and might be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, at least when he's active. He still needs a couple of tune-up fights, it looks like. But otherwise, none of the real top fighters seem to want to fight Triple G, and you see why.
So with the opportunity of Canelo fight not presenting itself, what would be the next logical step for him?
Maybe Ramirez at 68.
Is that a challenge?
Oh, Ramirez is a good fighter. Triple G would be a huge favorite, but Ramirez just coming off a career best performance. Also young fighter in his prime, tall and rangy in the division above Triple G. I mean, you'd like to see Triple G Canelo, but if you can't see that, you want to put him in with other fighters who are marketable, who have good styles, and who are considered better than just contenders.
On the subject of Canelo.
Last one, okay?
Okay, last one. On the subject of Canelo, have you seen Khan recently? He's looked like he's bulking up.
Of course. Well, how'd you think he was going to look? Yeah. Amir Khan showing up to win. Of course, he's the underdog. He's been a little chinny in his career. And Canelo's the bigger, stronger guy and a good counterpuncher. And Canelo's got a good chin. So Canelo's the favorite. You could see that, like, at a certain point thinking, Canelo's got to land something big to turn this around. That's not a scenario that's that far-fetched. It's not an uninteresting fight. The closer you get to it, the more interesting it seems. Kind of like Pacquiao-Bradley, although in the end, a lot of times in those situations, you talk yourself into thinking it's a better fight than it really is. Because Pacquiao-Bradley wound up just like the first two. But as that fight approached, at least the more I thought of it, I thought, maybe it's a better fight than I gave it credit for when it was made. And I'm starting to feel that way about Canelo and Khan.
All right, last one. If Khan gets the upset, does he vacate the title, move back down? Does he jump in there, keep it rolling, and fight Golovkin?
I'll tell you exactly what Khan does. He's a prize fighter, and he's always been this way. Khan doesn't duck. Whatever is the biggest fight that can be made for the most money, that's who will fight. But as I said before the fight started, this is the first round of the NBA playoffs. The NBA, you know exactly who's going to win the first round of every series, especially with the top 4 seeds, right? So here's Triple G, and everyone came out to watch Steph Curry, but Kawhi Leonard's not in the other corner because they're not up to that round of the playoffs yet. So until he gets Kawhi Leonard in the other corner, until that time, you're going to know before the fight starts who's going to win. But it doesn't really stop you from watching Steph play, right? So it hasn't stopped people from watching Triple G either.
Did Chocolatito show up, and is he ready for Gallo Estrada rematch? Looked like it wasn't.
Yeah, I think Chocolatito would be favored against anyone 115 and below.
Inoue, what do you think about Inoue?
Inoue is eventually his biggest fight. I don't think they would make that fight yet. If you were handling Inoue, wouldn't you want to wait until Chocolatito's a year or two older and your guy has a year or two more experience? So if I get the sense that if Chocolatito's side thought they could make that fight soon, they would.
Everyone's kind of seeing Canelo Golovkin taking down the same path as Mayweather-Pacquiao, the same scenario, prolonging it, to maximize
I would
the
say
potential
this.
of his
Jim asked me on the fight game, what's the expiration date? I mean, there's no real expiration date. We still watched Mayweather-Pacquiao years after the expiration date. But I would say people can genuinely start complaining if Cinco de Mayo of next year comes and goes and they still haven't fought. Then you can start complaining at Canelo. But I do think that if you're Canelo Alvarez and you're generating all this money, and there's the biggest threat by far is still he's a major attraction, obviously, but still hasn't proven a pay-per-view attraction that can do 500,000 buys or more. Obviously, you'd like him to build up a little more, and you'd like maybe to take a few more money fights before you risk it all. And by Canelo, I don't mean Canelo. Canelo doesn't care. I mean Golden Boy, because they're running a business over there, and if you have a meal ticket, you don't just throw him in with a guy who'd be favored to beat him. You'd like that guy who's favored to beat him to build up his star as big as possible. And you'd like your guy, meantime, to cash some paychecks on the way to that happening. So I would say all that is fair game. If you know the history of boxing, that stuff always happens. If that process goes by Cinco de Mayo of next year, then fans have a right to say, yo, you're ducking. That's enough, you're ducking.
He's the A-side. Shouldn't Golovkin cater to his demands? I mean, is he not the A-side?
Those are all negotiations. This is something when people first started hearing Floyd and Pacquiao going back and forth about that, everyone heard that as, recently before the fight, everyone heard that as bad news. I heard that as negotiated. Look, they're talking. That's better than not talking. And when you hear Triple G and Canelo start 157, 150 this, what's happening is a negotiation, and that's good news.
Do you think the WBC will actually strip him if the fight doesn't happen next?
Yeah, I do. I think they're boxed. I think they have to. What's that?
Where is the limit to A-side advantages when we're talking about a 155 pound?
If you think this is A-side advantages, look throughout boxing history. It's not like it's worse than it's ever been. If anything, like Sugar Ray Leonard won like 16 titles the night he fought Donnie Lalonde at a catch weight. That stuff has always happened.
With Golovkin having a shortage of opponents, Kell Brook kind of threw himself in there. What do you take to Golovkin Brook at some kind of catch weight?
If Kell Brook really wants to fight Gennady Golovkin, I'm sure that can be arranged. Yeah. I'd be shocked if Gennady's side didn't want to fight him.
What do you make of the 155,
So it's a great fight.
back and forth?
What's that?
What do you make of the 155, 160 in terms of the example it shows other fighters coming up?
For who? Who are you talking about now?
Golovkin, with Canelo saying, come to 155.
Well, here's the thing about a catch weight fight.
Yeah.
I don't like a catch weight fight is fine. There've always been catch weight fights too. This is not like something new. Every generation forgets what happened before, or maybe they don't know. Catch weights fights. It's not like that's a brand new term. What I do agree with fans who are angry about it though, is that the middleweight division is defined as weight limit 160 pounds. That's a middleweight. You can weigh less, but you can't weigh more. But if in the contract it says you have to weigh less than 160, you're not fighting at middleweight. That's not a middleweight fight. If the contract stipulates you can't weigh 160 pounds, by definition, that's not a middleweight fight. So, and therefore, Gennady Golovkin now has practically universal recognition as the real champ in the division because the other guy and the guy before him, Miguel Cotto, weren't fighting at middleweight.
If you're Triple G, do you stay at 160 or you go 168?
I go where the money is at this point.
Pacquiao's money.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're Triple G, you get in with the biggest named fighter that'll fight you.
And how much time do you think Triple G has? He's 35, 34? 34. How much time does he
Abel
have?
Sanchez makes the point that Triple G has fewer professional fights than Canelo Alvarez, and that he's a relatively young 34 because he didn't turn pro until his mid-20s. And then he didn't really fight world-class opposition until he was almost 30. So, but he did have a lot of amateur fights. Funny thing about punchers is, a lot of times people think they're taking a lot of shots. For example, Muhammad Ali seemed to be very damaged by the end of his career. George Foreman didn't. So why is that? Foreman didn't have Ali's defense because for $1,500 a week, sparring partners weren't going to come in and take chances against George Foreman, who was going to take their head off. But they would against Muhammad Ali, who wasn't going to hurt him. So guys like Golovkin can be very well preserved later into their careers because, in fact, in spite of the fact that they're not defensive geniuses, like a Rigondeaux or an Andre Ward, they ain't taken that many shots, really.